Hi, my name is Althea. My mother once made me bleed over a dirty spoon. Then she laughed and said, "Drama again?" No apology, no concern, just a joke at my expense. That was the moment I realized. My pain was entertainment in this house. They told the world I was unstable, ungrateful, bitter. But what if I told you I recorded everything? The silence, the humiliation, the years of being the invisible maid behind their picture-perfect life. What if the real story wasn't what they said about me, but what they never wanted you to hear? Want to know what happened after I hit record? They say families are sacred, but what if your altar is a dining table and your sacrifice is a dirty spoon? It was early, barely 7 o'clock a.m., when the familiar rattle of pans clanged through the kitchen in Charleston. Toast burned, again, because no one ever reset the toaster timer but me. Branson sat slouched at the table, phone in hand, headphones in. Vera, my mother, was moving with the force of someone already looking for a reason to explode. I stood at the sink, rinsing off the last of the breakfast plates I had cooked. Branson had left half his eggs untouched, but was sipping orange juice like he'd done something noble. I reached for the last bowl on the counter when Vera snapped behind me. "Seriously? You call this clean?" she barked. I turned and saw her holding up a spoon. It had a thin film of egg yolk on it. I blinked. "I haven't gotten to that one yet," I said, calmly. She stared at me like I'd cursed at the Pope. "He eats with these, and you leave them dirty." Disgusting. Her voice sliced sharper than any utensil in the drawer. I was literally still washing. I started. The slap wasn't on my face, but it may as well have been. She didn't hit me, not yet. She slammed her palm on the countertop so hard the sound made Branson pull one earbud out. I jumped, and my hand jerked. The spoon slipped from my grip. As I grabbed for it, the edge sliced clean across the web of my fingers. It wasn't deep, but it was fast. Blood welled up immediately. For a second, everything stilled. Branson raised an eyebrow. Vera blinked once, then chuckled. "Drama again," she said flatly, tossing the spoon back into the sink with a clatter. I stood there, blood dripping into the water, and realized they weren't shocked. They weren't even concerned. It was entertainment. My throat tightened, not from the pain, but from the hollow that opened behind my ribs. I wrapped a paper towel around the cut, pressing into it more out of habit than care, and walked away without another word. Upstairs, in the small room that had once been a linen closet and was now mine, I locked the door, sat on the edge of my bed, and opened the hidden app on my phone, the one that automatically activated every time I entered the kitchen. I watched the playback. Her voice, the slap on the counter, my hand jerking, the blood, her laugh. It wasn't the cut, it was what followed. I exported the file to cloud storage. 2 backups, one offline. I renamed the file, Exhibit A. "They won't remember this," I whispered to no one. "But I will, and one day, so will others." That night, while everyone else watched some reality show downstairs, I lay on my bed with the lights off. The room smelled like laundry detergent and lemon cleaner because I'd scrubbed it just that morning, as expected. And I remembered another morning. I was 11. I spilled a glass of juice at breakfast and cried because I knew what was coming. Vera smacked me across the mouth, and when I stumbled back, she hissed, "If you didn't want it, you shouldn't have dropped it." That was the first time I heard the phrase she'd go on to use for a decade, "Stop overreacting." It echoed every time she denied what happened, every time she turned my pain into a punchline, every time she looked past me like I was a window. I pulled my journal from under the bed and opened it to the latest page. There, I added one more line to the growing list of recorded abuses, not physical, not all the time, but the ones that stuck deeper, like barbs. Branson was still in the living room, shouting at a football game. I could hear the fridge door open, Vera offering him a refill. My hand throbbed beneath the Band-Aid. I made the wrap myself. No one had asked. I reached for my laptop, opened Reddit, and logged into the anonymous account I'd created weeks ago. I uploaded the clip under a post titled, "They made me bleed over a spoon. What would they do for a secret?" I didn't tag it, didn't describe it, just let the footage speak. The silence after the slap, the laughter, my blood, the paper towel, that was enough. I sat alone at the dinner table that evening. No one acknowledged me, not Branson, who chewed with his mouth open, not Vera, who scrolled on her phone mid-bite. My hand throbbed beneath the bandage, but I didn't flinch. My phone buzzed once. A comment had landed under my post. Just one. "You're not alone." They always said, everyone deserves a seat at the table. But in our house, there were only 3 chairs, 2 at the head, 1 reserved, and none for me. Dinner that night was no different. Vera stood at the stove, ladling gravy over steaming chicken thighs for Branson, while I hovered by the counter. She didn't ask what I wanted, she never did. Instead, she pulled a frozen tray from the microwave, its plastic film sagging like an afterthought. "Here," she said, sliding it across the counter without looking. "Still warm enough." Branson didn't even hide his smirk. "She's lucky to be fed at all," he muttered, for no one and everyone to hear. Vera didn't correct him. In fact, she added, "You think obedience gets cold meals? No, it gets served first." I took the tray silently and leaned against the wall to eat. No chair in sight. They had 2 cushioned ones for themselves, one newer chair Branson got when he strained his back lifting a controller. There was never a 4th. "People say you get used to these things. You don't. You just learn where you're not welcome and stop trying to sit down." After dinner, Vera tossed me a laundry basket as if handing off garbage. "Those towels better be folded the right way this time. Corners aligned. You're not new." "I've been doing it since I was 10, I said flatly. "Exactly," she snapped. "So stop acting like you need help. Honestly, you're not family. You're just someone who forgot to quit the job." I didn't flinch, not this time. But inside, her words carved something sharp. "You're not family." That night, as I sat on the floor of the upstairs hallway folding towels, I thought back to being 15. It was a Saturday, and Branson had been allowed to go to the mall while I stayed behind with a 3-page chore list. Vera had tapped the list against my forehead and said, "Earn your bed." Earn it. I'd scrubbed baseboards while my classmates posted pictures with smoothies and selfies. My back ached, but the real pain came from knowing no one expected me to be anywhere else. That phrase followed me through every birthday, holiday, and sick day. I wasn't living in that house. I was maintaining it. In the quiet of my room, I opened an old spiral notebook, the one with bent corners and scribbled margins. I flipped to a blank page and wrote across the top in bold block letters, "The Invisible Resume." Then I started listing. Cooked breakfast, 4x week since age 12, cleaned shared bathroom solo from age 11, packed Branson's school lunches, grades 9 to 12, managed grocery list, took calls for missed appointments, washed all guest linens without thanks. The more I wrote, the more I realized I hadn't just been neglected, I had been utilized. "If I can't be loved," I whispered, "I'll at least be remembered." I flipped to the next page and began logging every moment of emotional dismissal I could recall. Every public humiliation thinly veiled as teasing, every private demand passed off as duty. It read like an HR report, a log of service, not daughterhood. When the house grew quiet, I tiptoed back downstairs to grab a drink. As I passed the dining room, something made me pause. Branson's chair had a new cushion, black leather, quilted, a small lumbar pad stitched into it. He sat comfortably scrolling through his phone, feet on the table. There was still no chair for me. I turned, climbed back up the stairs, and opened the drawer where I kept my backup phone. Not the one they could check. The other one. The one with the encrypted apps, anonymous browsers, and offline notes. "If I'm not a part of this family," I whispered, "then I'll audit it like an outsider." I tapped open the spreadsheet titled Cost of Silence, slid the folder of images into the cloud, and double-checked the backups. I didn't sleep that night, because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving them. I was watching. There's a difference between being seated and being seen. One happens by habit, the other by heart. I sat at the edge of the dinner table that night, leg tucked under me like I was preparing to vanish. My plate rested on the table's corner. No one acknowledged my presence, not with a glance, not with a word. Just the soft scrape of Branson's fork against ceramic, the clink of Vera's glass as she poured herself another diet soda. Then came the knock. It was a neighbor, a woman from Vera's book club, Mrs. Hollingsworth. Vera opened the door with her best, gracious hostess smile, the kind that only appeared when eyes from outside were watching. "Oh, come in," she chirped. Mrs. Hollingsworth glanced around the table, confused. "Do you need another chair?" Vera barely paused. "Oh, she usually just grabs a stool." She was me. I was standing right behind her. The woman's eyes met mine briefly, then looked away, uncomfortable. I walked to the counter, pulled out the squeaky metal stool I usually use to reach the top shelf, and sat. My dinner was now colder than the room. Even the furniture knew its place better than I did. Later that evening, after dishes had been washed, by me, and the living room filled with the hum of Branson's video game, I sat on my bed and did something I hadn't done in months. I reached out. I texted my Aunt Janice, the one person in the family who, years ago, had taken me aside at a reunion and said, "You remind me of me at your age. Watch your back in that house." I didn't send a full confession, just a clip. The one of the spoon, the blood, Vera's laugh, and a message. "Tell me I'm not imagining this." I waited. 2 days later, Vera cornered me in the laundry room. The machines were off. The house was quiet. She held up her phone. "You think we don't talk to family?" I froze. Not out of guilt, but out of clarity. She had seen it. Janice had forwarded the clip. Or maybe shown it directly. I'd placed a hand into the water, and the shark surfaced immediately. Vera's voice was cold. "Don't ever try to make me the villain again. You live here. You eat our food. You don't get to rewrite the script." She left, and I stood there, the smell of bleach in my nostrils, heat rising behind my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak, because I realized I wasn't surrounded by allies. I was surrounded by relatives, and those aren't the same thing. It reminded me of sophomore year, English class. We had a poetry unit, and I submitted a piece titled "The House Where I'm Invisible." The teacher praised it, said it was powerful, raw. 2 days later, I was pulled out of third period and made to stand in front of the same class. Vera had called the school, demanding I clarify that the poem was fiction. She stood beside me, smiling politely, her hand on my shoulder like a leash disguised as affection. "I didn't mean any of it," I'd said to the class, humiliated. "When people betray you, don't just remember what they did. Remember how fast they did it." I deleted Janice's contact that night. I sat on my bed for a long time, phone in hand, screen blank, not out of rage, not even sadness, but the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from understanding your voice isn't just ignored, it's actively erased. So I stopped trying to be heard, and I started documenting. By the time the sun went down, I had organized my digital folders into categories. Not just videos, but text logs, voice memos, time-stamped photographs of task lists Vera used to tape to the fridge, and then, well past midnight, I crept downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was dark. The only light came from the oven clock blinking 1:03 a.m. I paused by the dining room. Something was different. The table was still set from dinner, plates cleared but napkins left folded, but one thing stood out like a cracked tooth in a smile. Even Branson's chair was missing. I counted. 1, 2. Only 2 chairs remained. I stared at the empty spot where my stool usually leaned against the wall. "If no chair wants me," I whispered, "I'll bring my own, and I'll carve my name into the back." Some sentences don't end with periods. They end with bruises you can't see. It had been quiet for 2 full days. Not peaceful, just quiet. And in our house, silence didn't mean relief. It meant the next blow would come sharper, more calculated. Vera wasn't the type to let things slide. She was the type to marinate. That morning, I was scrubbing the upstairs bathroom floor with a toothbrush. Not because it needed it, but because she said I missed a spot behind the toilet the week before. I didn't argue anymore. I knew better than to invite the kind of attention her voice came wrapped in. My phone buzzed in the hoodie pocket I'd tossed on the sink. I wiped my hands dry and checked it. A text from her. "Stop acting like a victim. You've always been a burden." I stared at it, not because I was shocked, but because in some tired corner of me, I expected something else, anything else. I didn't cry. I didn't reply. I sat back on my heels and remembered the day I got an A on my American Lit final essay. I had brought it home with hope, like a stupid dog carrying a trophy to the one person who never celebrated. Vera had scanned it once, then folded the page and said, "Don't expect praise for doing the minimum." And now, this text, this quiet typed bruise. If I was such a burden, why did they lean on me for everything? Why did they need me to run the errands, manage the calendar, refill prescriptions, monitor Branson's mood swings, remember what kind of syrup Vera liked in her coffee? I wasn't a burden. I was a system. I was the infrastructure. Later that evening, I passed by the stairs on the way to grab my coat. Branson's voice drifted from the kitchen. "So, carrot cake?" he asked. "Yes, his favorite," Vera replied brightly. "I already ordered it." I stopped halfway down and listened. "I'm thinking we surprise him Friday night. Don't tell him. We'll decorate after work." My birthday had been 4 days ago. I had spent it scrubbing grease off the stovetop. They hadn't said a word. That night, I walked 2 blocks to a nearby gas station and bought myself a cupcake. It was chocolate, the only flavor left in the tiny cooler. I used a matchbook from my old purse to light one sad candle. I sat at the bus stop bench, cars humming past behind me, and whispered into the night air, "Happy birthday, Althea. You made it another year without becoming them." And I meant it. The next day, Vera left Branson's muddy sneakers at the front door. Normally, I would have picked them up and wiped them clean, dried the soles, even arranged them in the entryway, just so, because that's what was expected. That was the unspoken contract. But I didn't touch them. That evening, she stopped me near the fridge. "Shoes still dirty?" I shrugged. Didn't have time. Her face didn't change. She didn't yell. She didn't insult. She just walked away. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than the screaming ever had. I went back upstairs and opened the back pages of my notebook, flipped past the invisible resume, past the task logs and the timestamps. I started a new section. Utilities of my presence. Laundry, 3x week, grocery list, daily updates, doctor reminders, 2x monthly conflict diffusal, constant, each line a record. Not of love, of use. It wasn't a diary. It was evidence. I started saying no in small ways. "I'm too tired." "Not today." I forgot. No one noticed, yet. They would. Later that week, I was taking the trash out. Vera didn't ask me to. She never had to. That was the whole point. I opened the front door and found a printed sheet taped beside it, typed, centered, bold header. Expectations for living under our roof. There were bullet points, some practical, some emotional, but one line made me pause. Respect is shown through silence, not attitude. I didn't tear it down. I didn't crumple it. I folded it, corner to corner, and tucked it into my journal behind the cupcake receipt. They didn't know it yet, but they'd taught me everything I needed to dismantle them. Change doesn't always enter like a storm. Sometimes it tiptoes in, one no at a time. The air inside the house felt different, and not in a way anyone could name. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't thrown anything, I hadn't even left the dishes unwashed, but I'd stopped filling in the cracks. That was enough to unbalance everything. It began with me sitting in the kitchen scrolling through videos. I had one earbud in, and my phone angled toward the light from the window. It wasn't a secret what I was watching. Clips from our own house. Recordings of Vera's insults, of Branson's entitlement, of the day she called me not family. They weren't just memories now. They were files, cataloged, dated. I was replaying the one from the birthday that wasn't, the candle flickering on a gas station cupcake, when she walked in. "What are you watching?" Vera asked, too calm. I didn't answer. I paused the screen and looked up, locking eyes. She stepped closer. Then came the voice from behind me. "What's going on here?" Eldrick had walked in from the garage, his boots still muddy, his presence heavier than usual. Vera didn't respond. She just gestured to the phone. Eldrick looked at the screen, then at me. Without warning, he grabbed the phone from my hand and hurled it against the tile wall. The case cracked, screen shattered, battery skidded across the floor. He stood over me and said, "We didn't raise you to humiliate us." I bent down, calmly picked up the pieces, one by one. Then I looked up and said, "You didn't raise me to survive you either." Neither of them responded. What they didn't know was the video was already backed up in 3 places: cloud, drive, offline stick. I wasn't careless. I was prepared. The next morning, Vera announced the washing machine was out of order and handed me Branson's laundry. Only Branson's. A mound of mud-soaked jeans, hoodies, and mismatched socks. It was 29 degrees outside. My breath fogged the window near the basement sink. The water in the utility tub was ice cold, even with gloves. I stripped them off and plunged my bare hands in. By the 3rd sweatshirt, my knuckles cracked and bled. Vera passed by at one point, arms folded, mug of tea in hand. She didn't stop walking. "It builds character," she said, as if quoting a motivational poster. I looked up from the basin and said, "Then why's mine the only one that's built?" She kept walking. Later that afternoon, I skipped folding the extra towels she liked arranged in hotel style. I left them in the basket. I didn't polish the silverware tray in the drawer. I didn't ask if Branson needed lunch for work. The absences piled up like crumbs on the counter, subtle but visible if you looked. Vera noticed, not with words, but with glances that lingered too long, with coffee mugs placed a little too hard on the table, with questions left unsaid but simmering behind pursed lips. Around 10 a.m., as I wiped the countertop, not out of duty, just habit, she finally spoke. "You're acting strange." I turned to her. My hands were steady. "You think control is love," I said. "It isn't. It's just dependency with perfume." She blinked. "You need this family." Her voice dropped lower. "You're nothing outside it." "Maybe," I said. "But at least nothing is quiet." And I walked away mid-conversation, for the first time. That evening, Branson kicked off his shoes by the front door, like always. Mud clung to the soles. Vera came into the hallway and stared at them. Then at me. She didn't say a word. I looked back and said, "Not my job anymore." Then I walked upstairs, into my room, and locked the door, for the first time in my life. From the hallway, I could hear her whisper to Eldrick. "She's changing," she said, "and not in a good way." They didn't know it yet, but I had already decided what came next. They stopped yelling. That should have felt like peace. It felt like planning. In my house, silence wasn't a truce. It was a recalibration. Vera no longer barked out orders, and Eldrick had gone mute with his newspaper again. But it wasn't mercy. It was a tactical shift. They weren't trying to control me with volume anymore. Now it was routine. Pressure by omission. 3 days into the hush, Branson came back from the gym and threw his mud-caked sneakers onto my perfectly made bed. Not the floor, not the mat outside the door, my bed. He didn't say a word, neither did Vera, who stood in the doorway sipping lukewarm tea. I walked into the room, looked at the sneakers, then looked at both of them. Calmly, I picked up each shoe and walked back to Branson's door. I dropped them, mud down, right at the entrance. He turned, eyebrows up. "Seriously, that's your job." I looked him straight in the face and said, "I quit." Then I closed my door. No one followed me, no one knocked. Saturday afternoon came. Vera had her church ladies over, Margaret, Linda, and the younger one who always tried to be invisible. They gathered in the living room, holding dollar store floral mugs, gossiping about someone's niece who moved in with a roommate she called her best friend, but we all know what that means. I passed through quietly, headed to the kitchen. They all smiled tightly. Vera beamed like the queen of clean. Margaret spilled her sweet tea. It splashed across the hardwood like a Rorschach test. Everyone froze for half a beat. Vera turned to me sweetly. "Clean it up, dear." I could have said no, but I didn't. I walked over, grabbed a rag, knelt down. As I scrubbed, I heard it. "She's so well trained," Linda whispered, not even trying to lower her voice. I stopped wiping, slowly looked up, caught her eyes and didn't look away. Her face faltered. Just a second. She looked at me like I was both the maid and the mirror. I finished cleaning and stood, It wasn't the kneeling that cut me. It was the laughter. I wasn't family. I was staff. That night, I started pulling the chore charts Vera had pinned to the fridge over the years, laminated ones, holiday lists, rotations that somehow only had my name on them. I found shopping lists where my handwriting filled in every item, cleaning logs, trash pickup reminders. I sorted everything into a folder, labeled it, evidence of belonging. Then I started tracking my time, 6 o'clock a.m., wake up, make coffee, 2 sugars, almond milk, unload dishwasher, 6:30 a.m., start Branson's laundry, 7 o'clock a.m., iron, Dad's shirt for Sunday service, 7:20 a.m., reset thermostat, Vera messed up, 8 o'clock a.m., fold towels, refill pantry list, check medical calendar, 15 hours. That was my daily average. The next day, Vera called my name from the downstairs hallway. Once, twice, 5 times. I didn't answer. I was in the laundry room, folding a sheet slowly. The dryer buzzer went off. I didn't move. That night, at the dinner table, she muttered under her breath, "She's been strange lately, moody." Eldrick, chewing steak, said, "She's getting too old for free shelter." That was it. Nothing directed. No confrontation. Just passive threats, floating like smoke. I said nothing. Until the next night, I walked into the kitchen just as Vera set down her mug. She looked up, waiting. I met her eyes and said, "If you're going to start charging rent, I'll start invoicing back pay." She froze. Eldrick's fork hit his plate. Branson choked on his soda. No one spoke. I didn't wait for permission to leave the room. They thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. In this house, smiles were never innocent. They were weapons with veneers. Things had gotten colder, not louder. No more accusations hurled across the hallway. No doors slammed. Just a steady, eerie quiet that blanketed the air like a tarp over something decomposing. That kind of silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. They were planning, watching. So was I. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. At first, I thought it might be a spam call or one of Vera's weird manipulations. But then I heard her voice. "Althea? It's Juniper Keene. From high school. English." I hadn't heard that name in nearly a decade. She had been the only adult to ever write "Your Voice Matters" on one of my essays. I think it was you, on Reddit, the video, she said gently. "I recognized your voice, and I wanted to tell you, you're not making this up. You never did. And I see you." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a moment. Someone had seen. Really seen. We agreed to meet the next morning. Quietly, neutral ground. A diner out on Highway 61. No questions, just connection. That evening, I sat at dinner and didn't say a word. No pass the salt, no thank you. Just stillness. Vera looked at me like I was a well-groomed poodle on display. "Isn't she lovely when she's quiet?" she said with syrupy pride. "Peaceful, like a good girl." Branson, chewing open-mouthed, snorted. "Maybe she's finally learned her role." My hands didn't tremble because I was afraid. They trembled because every cell in my body screamed to erupt. But I didn't. I blinked slowly, exhaled once, and stayed silent. They didn't understand resistance when it didn't scream. They only saw submission in the absence of noise. That was their blindness. The next few days, Vera started acting pleasant. She offered to make me breakfast, complimented my hair, even said she was so proud of how mature I'd become. It wasn't guilt. It was preemption. She was trying to plant an alibi. Eldrick, meanwhile, didn't say much, just watched me, tracked my movements like I was carrying a match into a fireworks shop. And I documented it all. I took screenshots of old texts, printed 4 comments from the video thread that read like validation letters from strangers who'd lived my same story in different zip codes. I filed them in a binder labeled, "The Line They Crossed." That night, Juniper texted me a quote. "Some people will hate you for breaking the silence they used to control you." I didn't reply. I just stared at it for a long time, memorizing the cadence of the truth. It was late when Branson barged into my room. No knock, just thunder. "Did you seriously post that crap online?" he snapped, Mom says you're ruining her reputation. He stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I leaned back in my chair, looked him dead in the eye, and said, then maybe she should have protected her character instead of her image. He opened his mouth, probably to argue or spit some insult. I didn't give him the chance. I tapped my phone's screen. The red dot blinked. Recording. Since the moment he opened the door, he saw it, saw the lens, the dot, and blinked first. You don't scream when you know the proof speaks louder. You just prepare. I hadn't cried in days. My tear ducts had clocked out, but my printer hadn't stopped humming. I'd printed pages until the ink ran dry, not for confrontation, for record-keeping, for legacy. It started with an email. Vera had forwarded a confirmation message from a church committee, but she'd forgotten to remove the original thread. I clicked back, not expecting much, and found something I wasn't supposed to see. Attached was a PDF. Branson Doyle, college application packet. I opened it. I knew the writing. I knew every phrasing in that essay because it was mine. My GPA, my hours volunteering at the senior center, my community service form scanned into a new file and renamed. She had taken my work and handed it to him, just like that, my chance, my voice, rebranded, sanitized, assigned to someone who hadn't lived it. I printed both versions, the one I submitted junior year and the one refiled under Branson's name. The label on the folder I slid them into, academic theft. Later that night, I opened an anonymous Gmail I'd created months ago. The subject line was simple: academic misrepresentation, urgent. I didn't rant, I didn't vent, just attached the two versions side by side, highlighted identical phrases, pointed out the mismatched timestamps. No signature, no bitterness, only the line. Please review the attached records. The truth is in the details. I clicked send. Then I waited. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then an automatic reply from the University Conduct Board. We've received your concern and will begin internal investigation. Vera was unusually still that morning. Eldrick stirred his coffee with a spoon, but didn't drink it. Branson stomped through the kitchen like a cartoon storm cloud. I don't get it, he grumbled. I did everything right, and all I could think was, you copied everything. You just didn't live it. By Wednesday, the Wi-Fi password changed. When I asked Vera, she said, you've been too distracted lately. Focus on family. But Branson had full access, streaming games, laughing with his friends. I shrugged, walked upstairs, and hot-spotted my laptop from the neighbor's unsecured network. Their connection was slow, but truth didn't require speed, just direction. I wrote in my notebook, they can block signals, not signals of truth. The shift was visible in their eyes now. Vera wasn't just tense, she was calculating. Eldrick stayed home from work 2 mornings in a row, mumbling something about needing to lay low. At night, I heard them whispering in the living room. The couch creaked under Vera's weight as she leaned in toward Eldrick. We need to fix this before it spreads, she said. She doesn't know what she's done. From the hallway, I stood still, listening, breathing. Then I turned toward the stairs and whispered, not loud enough for them to hear. Oh, I know exactly what I've done and what I'm about to do next. Most masks don't fall. They split, quietly, slowly, then all at once. The house felt thinner, not quieter, just stretched, like a balloon filled too close to bursting. The silence wasn't a pause anymore. It was a countdown. Desperation had crept in through the cracks, curling around every corner of the hallway. That morning, Vera posted a live stream. She angled her phone just right, the background clean and curated, no clutter, no reality. She smiled into the camera with damp, wide eyes and said, I've done everything I could as a mother. We sacrificed everything for her, and this is how she repays us? She dabbed at a tear that wasn't there. Parenting isn't always appreciated, she added, her voice cracking on cue. Sometimes they grow up bitter, resentful. They forget the love that raised them. Comments flooded in. You're so strong, Mama. I'm crying with you. They'll understand one day. I watched it in silence from my laptop, the screen's blue light casting shadows across my bedroom wall. No rage, no heartbreak, just stillness. I opened my video editor and clipped the live stream. Then I layered it with audio. Vera calling me useless, Eldrick yelling, Branson laughing while I picked up his socks. I didn't add a voiceover. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't need a narrator. That night, my bedroom power cut off. Lights, outlets, everything. I checked the breaker box, already knowing. Eldrick stood nearby in the hallway, arms folded. Must have tripped, he said flatly. Later, I tried the kitchen cabinet. It was locked. For meal planning, Vera said with a shrug. You're not exactly consistent these days. Branson's snacks, of course, were untouched on the counter. In my notebook, I wrote, When power leaves your hands, steal it back with proof. The next morning, a text from Juniper. Your clips are starting to get noticed. Quietly. Carefully, I checked Reddit. A thread titled Invisible Labor, a Daughter's Documentary, had over 200 upvotes. Anonymous users called out covert familial slavery, emotional outsourcing, and caregiver identity theft. I didn't reply. I bookmarked every comment. I wasn't trying to go viral. I was trying to be seen. Later, I was cleaning out an old drawer when I found a card. Graduation from 8th grade. On the front, you did it. Inside, Vera had written, To our little helper, don't grow too fast. We still need our house manager. Not daughter, not Althea, house manager. They never saw a person, just a role. That night, my door opened without a knock. Vera stood there with a printout in her hand. Reddit comments, screenshots in red pen. You want to ruin us? She hissed. I sat still, calm. Her voice didn't land like it used to. I looked her straight in the face. No, I said. I want you to sit with the version of me you created and ask yourself why I left her behind. She didn't answer. Her lips quivered, her eyes darted, but no sound came out. She closed the door slowly. That night, no one said grace before dinner, and no one looked me in the eye. For years, they taught me silence meant submission, but silence in the right hands becomes sentencing. I moved differently now, deliberate, measured. There was no shouting match to win, no performance to endure, just tension so thick you could cut it with a butter knife and still not get through. They didn't ask why I was quiet anymore. They knew. A few days earlier, Eldrick had cornered me in the garage when I was on my way out. I'd just finished clipping video footage from the kitchen, the one where Vera called me a disappointment in front of the pastor's wife. I wasn't hiding anything, not anymore. The phone was out, visible. That was enough to set him off. He stepped into my path, lowered his voice, and growled, One more recording and I'll break your damn fingers. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. He had no idea the mic had already picked up everything. I'd tucked a wireless collar mic into my coat, battery full, connection stable. The sound was crystal clear. His tone, the threat, my silence. I sent the file that evening, anonymously, to the HR department of the company he'd worked at for 23 years. 3 days later, a letter came in the mail. Suspension pending review. At dinner, Vera dropped her fork twice. Branson mumbled something about Dad being in a mood. No one said anything to me. The next morning, Vera found my fellowship application on the printer tray. I hadn't tried to hide it. It was already sent weeks ago, but she didn't know that. She held it up. You really think anyone wants to listen to a bitter little girl whine into a microphone? She didn't wait for an answer, just ripped the page in half and dropped it into the trash. I didn't react. I picked it up calmly, carried it to the recycling bin, and washed my hands. Then I checked my email. Subject: Fellowship Acceptance. Congratulations, Althea Watts. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I wasn't shaking from nerves. It was release. I closed the laptop and walked through the kitchen like a breeze. No fanfare, no smirk, just motion. The house had gone eerily quiet. Branson avoided my eyes. Vera slammed cupboard doors with a little more drama. Eldrick barely spoke. No one asked me to do dishes. No one told me what was for dinner. I watched dishes pile in the sink. Laundry baskets overflowed. Branson left late for class 2 days in a row. Eldrick skipped dinner for 3 nights. One morning, Vera whispered to someone on the phone. I think it was a friend from church. She's changed the energy in this house. She wasn't wrong. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice once. That evening, I opened my inbox to a message from Juniper. Subject, podcast invitation, campus radio feature. The body read, we'd love to have you tell your story anonymously. We'll protect your identity, but we want the world to hear your voice. It matters. I sat at my desk, pulled out the binder labeled receipts, and placed it gently on the table. Inside, screen captures, transcripts, audio files, handwritten notes on every incident I'd cataloged. I touched the corner of the binder and whispered, You want quiet? Let me show you what silence built. People think walking away is cowardice. But staying in a war that only wants you bleeding, that's surrender. I woke up early, not from noise, but from knowing. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't afraid. There was no big decision left to be made. It was already done in my mind. I was leaving. There was no suitcase flung open, no rushed packing, no dramatic sobbing against a window pane. Just method, just intention, just me, folding a few sets of clothes into a small duffel bag with the kind of calm that only comes after years of chaos. I walked into the kitchen and wiped down the counters, not because I was told, but because I wanted to leave no crumbs. I swept under the fridge, rinsed the sponge, and left it in the sink. The gesture felt surgical, like finishing the last stitch in a wound you no longer claim. Then I grabbed a pen and stuck a post-it note on the fridge door. This was never my home, just my job. Branson passed by, paused in the doorway. He didn't say anything. Yet he didn't have to. The air around me said more than I ever could. Vera, sensing something, found me in the hallway. She crossed her arms and asked, After all we've done for you? I turned, calm, controlled. That's the thing, I said. You didn't do it for me. You did it to me. She opened her mouth like she had a speech ready, but the words didn't land. Eldrick stood nearby. He said nothing. But that was his pattern. Silence with weight. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't demand a blessing. I walked to the dining room table, placed a small cardboard box down in the center, and gently pushed it forward. Inside was everything. A USB drive labeled Proof, a printed timeline of incidents, the graduation card that called me house manager, a folded letter. This is who I had to be, not who I am. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't ring the doorbell on my way out. I just left. Juniper met me at the curb 20 minutes later. She didn't ask questions. She just helped me load the bag into her back seat and said, You ready? I nodded once. By nightfall, I was in her spare room, unpacking the little I brought. It was a modest space, white walls, clean linens, the faint scent of lavender sachets tucked into the drawers. Peace had a texture, and I could feel it now. The next morning, I woke before my alarm and made breakfast, just for me. No list, no shouting, no anticipation of being criticized. I scrambled eggs, toasted a bagel, and ate at the small kitchen table while birds chirped outside the window. It wasn't the quiet that shocked me. It was that no one needed me to earn it. That afternoon, Juniper slid an envelope across the table as I sipped tea. I opened it carefully. Inside, a typed letter from a podcast editor. We heard your radio feature. Would you like to turn it into a series? I held the letter in my hands for a long time. Then I looked up and whispered, not for Juniper, not for anyone in the room, but for myself. My story doesn't end here, but theirs did. Some walls echo after you've walked out. Not with your voice, but with everything they once ignored. It started as a whisper, a simple envelope in a mailbox, a call never returned, a silence louder than a slap. Then the consequences came in waves. Vera opened the letter first. The seal from the state university cracked open in her trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the words, revoked, irregularities, plagiarized content, each one hitting harder than the last. She didn't cry. She collapsed into the sofa, hand over her chest, like the weight of reality had taken longer to arrive than expected. but had landed all at once. In the kitchen, Branson yelled from behind his phone, "You said she wouldn't do anything." He threw the device across the counter, the screen cracking as it slid. "She wasn't supposed to fight back. You said she'd stay quiet." I wasn't there to see it, but I could feel it in my bones. They'd trained me to obey. I just followed their system, with better records. Later that same week, Vera's live stream, the one where she played the heartbroken mother, was clipped and layered against footage from our home. My home. The places where her voice had torn into me, the way she laughed at my pain. My anonymous podcast dropped the final episode, How Families Manufacture Silence and Profit from It. The survivor advocacy group in our state reposted it. The church board requested her resignation quietly. There was no letter, no confrontation, just silence, the kind that stings. Branson's name, once clean, became a meme in gamer circles. Screenshots of his falsified achievements surfaced. His user handle was mocked in forums. Eldrick applied to 2 jobs, got turned down from both. One HR email politely cited cultural fit concerns. I never named them. I didn't have to. The pattern was so specific, those who knew, knew. Months passed. My new apartment was nothing grand. 2 rooms, laminate floors, a tiny balcony that overlooked a grocery store parking lot. But it was mine. I worked part-time at a women's shelter, helping women navigate paperwork and speak for themselves when their voices shook too much. One morning, a package arrived from Juniper. Inside was a printed, bound copy of my podcast scripts, the publisher's logo stamped neatly on the back. As I flipped through the pages, my phone buzzed on the table. A private number. I didn't answer. Some doors deserve to stay shut, not because you're bitter, but because you've finally found peace. Later that evening, a new email appeared. From Vera. Subject: We still love you. We miss you. Let's talk. I stared at it. No apology, no accountability. I didn't delete it. I forwarded it to Juniper with a single line. They didn't apologize. They begged for what I no longer need. I logged off, made tea, and stood barefoot on the balcony, watching people load groceries into their trunks. There was something cleansing about ordinary things that weren't loaded with guilt or expectation. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. This house ran on silence. I cut the power. Now all they hear is the echo of who I became without them. Screen fades to black. Podcast voiceover plays. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's the loudest ending you can give.